Welcome to Stackhunters. I'm Bradley Stalder with guest tonight, Billy Muzio. That's
What
right.
up?
Yes, Director of Operations here at Player Profiler. Also doing a lot of awesome things behind the scenes. I don't know how much you want to talk about that, Billy, but I know you've been working your tail off and have been out of the public sphere for some time. But it was very good to be with you doing the ranking summit earlier this week and getting some fantasy football stuff out for the people because they're hungry for it, Billy.
Oh, it's football time, and I've been busy behind the scenes, but I'm back into the saddle for football, back into content, back into rankings, back in projections, getting these things out to the public. Everyone's excited. I'm excited. I've sat down, gone through a couple bottles of wine to get these things out the door. Tough work, tough times. Somebody's got to do it. I'm here for the people.
He is here for the people, and we are here for the people tonight. Billy and I are going to be jumping into best ball rankings. Some of the best in the biz, if not the best in the biz. I think they're the best in the biz because it's Player Profiler. We bring you the best content in the industry. Billy, of course, with his winning rankings. You were number one for some time. What was it? Just a couple years ago. And both in season and during the off season as well, the draft rankings. Billy and I will bring you the rankings, all of that right after this. All right, Billy, we're going to kick it off with a player that I'm pretty high on this year, and a lot of people are, but there are some concerns, some lurking concerns about this player and whether he will hit the age cliff. Are we trusting in Derrick Henry in 2024? Because the projections for me come out very, very high, very bullish on Derrick Henry. The sky is the limit, but we also have the concerns. Is he going to hit the age cliff? This is the right spot, though, to have one more mega season. Is that a player that you are also very high on in the rankings?
I am actually. Initial projections, he actually came in as RB5. I did some minor tweaks, came back in at RB8, but you got to love the landing spot. You got to love the RPO system. And it's not like Lamar Jackson is a quarterback that's going to be, leeching touchdowns like we have inside of, the Philly offense with the tush push. You can even argue that, inside of New Orleans, you have Taysom Hill who lurks there and steals touchdowns from the running back. There's a lot of systems. Josh Allen, right, is another scenario we can think about where the quarterback, where other pieces may lurk, leech those touchdowns from the RB1, but this is not an offense where Lamar Jackson is necessarily the go-to goal line guy and is going to be stealing these touchdowns. And so got to love the fact that Derrick Henry is the de facto RB1. There's not a lot of touch for competitions. There's Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, who's still recovering from that gruesome knee injury. Although he was my boy last year, and I still like his upside this year, we have to expect him to be a little behind and not as explosive as he was last year. So Henry, to me, as a big buy, like I'm pulling the trigger on him above A-Chain. I'm pulling the trigger on him above Kyren Williams, and that's pretty comfortably inside of the rankings and drafts, especially in half PPR. And there's a real discussion for him potentially above Gibbs, honestly, inside of drafts when you're talking about half PPR versus full PPR, just because of the touchdown upside and, of course, the half points per reception, where Derrick Henry is a real discussion here at RB6/5 inside the rankings.
Yeah, I think he is a borderline first round value that you're getting mid, back end of the second round, sometimes the third round in your fantasy drafts. He is a player that he's dynamic catching the ball. He wasn't used that way in Tennessee. We don't expect a huge bump in passing volume, but when he gets the ball in his hands, he's able to get the receptions and take the ball down the field. They can't tackle him. These 5'10" defensive backs can't tackle Derrick Henry. So there we go. There was a question in the chat about, if not Henry, then who in the backfield? And I think it is, until Keaton Mitchell gets back, it's Justice Hill. I think Justice Hill is the backup that you want. And I've been drafting him pretty regularly in the back end of the drafts, because just in case Keaton Mitchell's not ready. And Derrick Henry, he has 5 screws in his foot still from the injury from a few years ago. just in case something happens. We saw what Justice Hill was able to do and Gus Edwards was able to do in this backfield. Rasheen Ali is still coming back from his core muscle injury. So a player that, we're monitoring and we liked coming out of the draft, but at the same time, I think the next guy up is Justice Hill if it's not Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I agree. And Justice Hill was fairly productive last season in his limited opportunity shares. And I do think that he's going to have some involvement, probably more on earlier than later. And I think that once we get Keith Mitchell back and some more clarity on Rasheen, Ali, I think then he starts stepping in the equation as well. But I think it's pretty clearly when I look at the projections, Lamar Jackson's usually 25, 28% of the overall rushing share. And so that leaves us, with a good portion still. You add in Derrick Henry, who's probably in that 54% rush share volume. And then we got, the 8% or 9% to Keaton Mitchell. We got, 4 to 5% for Rasheen Ali. And then you got, a couple carries here for the other miscellaneous backs in the backfield. And pretty comfortably, we're seeing the bulk of the lion's share here with Derrick Henry, probably about 270, 280 rushing attempts on a safe side.
All right, we're going to shift gears for players that I am higher on than ADP that are flip-flopped. DeAndre Hopkins over Calvin Ridley is how I have it in my projections. Billy, it's going to be hard for us to move away from a player who's been getting a 28% target share and in the Tennessee Titans offense, who we project to have some of the highest passing volume in the NFL. I have Hopkins over Calvin Ridley, and I don't know if that's necessarily the hottest of takes, but there is a full round of ADP difference between Hopkins and Ridley. I'm bullish on the Tennessee Titans overall. And if it's Hopkins as the number one receiver, we want in on that offense with Brian Callahan. And he said, yes, Callahan said that Jamar Chase is going to be, or Calvin Ridley is going to be in the Jamar Chase role. I think it's actually going to be DeAndre Hopkins in that role, moving around the formation, getting open, and he's just the better receiver.
I have a little more trepidation when it comes to the Tennessee Titans passing game. I'm a little more bullish in the rushing game than I am their passing game. I just don't have a lot of faith in Will Levis. I'm not sold that he's actually good at football, quite frankly. Let's put it that way. But he is surrounded by the weapons. He has DeAndre Hopkins. He has Calvin Ridley. He has Tyler Boyd. He's got Chigo, who's a yak monster at the tight end position if they choose to use him, plus two very viable and capable pass catchers. So he has the opportunity to succeed.
Tony Pollard and Taze Spears.
Yes, and I don't necessarily think that that's a good thing, though, for Calvin Ridley. And I don't think that's a good thing for Tyler Boyd. I think it's going to benefit the running backs, and I think it's going to benefit the alpha receiver, who, in my opinion, is still DeAndre Hopkins. When we look at the Underdog ADP, Hopkins comes in as the wide receiver 42, in my opinion, mispriced inside draft rooms. In my projection, so you mentioned that you had Hopkins above Ridley. I also have Hopkins above Ridley. I have Hopkins in as wide receiver number 37, right behind Keenan Allen. And then Ridley I have as wide receiver 41. So I have them kind of clustered together. It is a tier about 10 fantasy points separated. But I'm going to be honest with you, I've never been a huge Calvin Ridley fan, number one. Two, he's succeeded more as the wide receiver 2 than the alpha wide receiver. We saw that in Atlanta with Julio. Then he goes over to, of course, his latest, gig where he had over in Jacksonville. And I think he outproduced my expectations, but still failed to live up to the expectations that he was being drafted inside of the draft rooms in 2023. Yet when he kind of played, I don't want to say behind Kirk Cousins, but he succeeded alongside of, Christian Kirk. He succeeded alongside of Christian Kirk, but when we saw the games where Christian Kirk exited and injured, Calvin really necessarily didn't step into this alpha role and took on the bulk of the carries. He kind of still had that same role and was targeted, but it wasn't anything outside the norm where we would expect him to be in like the top 12, top 15 of wide receivers. So I think he's a great complementary piece. I've never been sold on him as an alpha. And I think that this is kind of a perfect spot for him for being behind DeAndre Hopkins as well as to the weapons. But again, I don't think the volume is going to be there to support him like it would have been in Atlanta or it would have been inside of Jacksonville even. I don't think we're going to see the type of volume because this defense is much improved. We're probably going to see a bunch of 3 and outs. They're going to lean on the rushing game as not only rushing attempts, but also outs for the quarterback position as dump offs. And I think it's going to hurt Calvin Ridley, quite frankly.
Well, you and I disagree about the Tennessee Titans. Let's put a beer bet to it, Billy. Let's put a beer bet to it.
Make sure we got to log these. We got to.
I'm sure that
I'm creating an Excel sheet right now. Like I'm not even waiting. Beer bets with Bradley.
2024.
Do it. So
Tennessee Titans are a good offense. Billy.
No, that's so vague. So put a beer bet out there.
Do we want efficiency or volume? Because the driver for the success for me for Titans is the volume. I think they're going to be a top 5 passing offense in the NFL.
All right, Calvin Ridley. What do you have in your projections?
Calvin Ridley.
If you tell me inside the top,
I'm really high on DeAndre Hopkins though.
Where's Hopkins?
I have DeAndre Hopkins as my 20th overall player.
I mean, it's not outside the norm. I mean, we're talking about 20 fantasy points separating 20 and 37.
No, but I have DeAndre Hopkins,
player,
20th overall player.
Okay, so you're like top 15 receiver then. Top 10
He's a top 7 receiver for me.
Oh boy. Okay, beer bet number 1, DeAndre Hopkins is not top 10. Okay, what's beer bet? So where do you have Ridley?
I have Ridley much lower. Let's see. Wide receiver 11.
Wide receiver 11?
Yeah.
I will give you beer bet that he is not inside the top 20.
Okay. We've got 2 beer bets here going. We love it.
So we got to recap for everybody here. Everyone knows my record with Theo. I'm undefeated with Theo right now. Now versus Bradley this year for 2024. DeAndre Hopkins will not be a top 10 receiver, according to me. And for Calvin Ridley, he will not be inside the top 20. Beer bet is official. It's inside of a Google Doc.
It's in the Google Doc.
And I have just shared it with Bradley. So
I love
he is bound. He is now bound by contract.
I'm here.
Bradley's going to owe me like a keg by the time we're done with this season.
We're here for that. Another player that I'm very bullish on versus ADP, but I'm interested to hear your take, Billy, is Brian Robinson. Robinson is, where is he on my rankings? I just had him up. Robinson is, come here, Brian Robinson. He's right now ADP 111.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have him as my projected 55th overall player, RB21.
Okay.
Which close. Is, but it's so there are a couple things that I'm thinking about in terms of Brian Robinson. Obviously, Austin Eckler is there. But if you remember, the LA Chargers wanted to get a running back to give Austin Eckler not the bulk of the carries. Brian Robinson can handle that. And the other thing is Jaden Daniels. I know there's a comment in the comment section. I'm going to read it in a second. But Jaden Daniels is also...
Says the guy drinking wine.
Brian Robinson is a player that I'm here for. My projections put him at a 47% rush share, 190 carries, 800 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, 8% target share, 42 targets, a receiving touchdown, about 280 receiving yards. So this is a player I think that is massively mispriced. I hate
to make you redo it. Can you repeat the numbers? I was pulling up the Excel sheet.
Sure. 47% rush share.
Okay.
190 rush attempts.
What's the total? What's the rushing yards?
800.
Okay. Keep going.
9 rushing touchdowns.
9 rushing touchdowns. Okay.
8% target share.
Okay.
That gives him 42 targets.
Okay.
26 receptions, 280 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown.
Okay. We're pretty close here. So I have him as RB. Let's see here. I got two sheets pulled up. I got him right now as RB number 24. So we're closer together than ADP. And when I say RB 24, between RB 24 and RB 21 is 1.5 fantasy points. So
yeah, my RB 25 is Najee Harris, and he is he's 18 spots lower than Brian Robinson overall.
Okay. So yeah, we're close on Brian Robinson. ADP on Underdog right now is RB 33. So you have him 12 spots in just the RB position ahead. I have him 9 spots in the RB position ahead. So we're both bullish on Robinson. A couple things to note here. Robinson was pretty effective inside the passing game last year. It's not like he's some chump in the passing game, but everyone looks at him as a plotter, which he is. I will not argue that, but he's a plotter who can catch. And so that is something that it can't be ignored. I mean, his expected yards per reception right now is 9.5, which I lowered to 8 just for the sake of regression. And I gave him 1.5 receiving touchdowns. I was at 45.8 targets and 33.9 receptions. So we're very close there. The rushing game's slightly different, but not much. I gave him 44% of the rushing share, which was a total of 214.72 rushing attempts.
So my projections include like missed games. So I only have Brian Robinson projected for 15 games. Okay.
Yeah. So we're close on rushing attempts. Yardage I've slightly higher. So it looks like you have him probably at like a 3.8 or 3.9 yard per carry. I have him at 4.0 because I'm at 858.
Yeah, it's about 4.1. Yeah. 190 for 799.
And I got him 7.1. So we're very close here. We're both bullish on Robinson. A couple other notes this week of camp that we saw was that Eckler was returning kicks. And when I saw that, I came back into the sheet and adjusted Eckler down like 4% of the rushing share. Because if they're not going to have, their RB2 out there returning kicks, or if they had any plan on being like a 1A or 1B, right? If it was 1A, 1B, there's no way he's returning kicks. So this is pretty clear now, de facto RB2 land, or RB2 on the team for Austin Eckler. And now it's even a question where I had him kind of heavily leading the target share. Now it's a question, how much does he lead the target share?
Like he could easily be a 0 is the scary part of Austin Eckler.
Yeah, I don't think quite as
Brian Robinson won't go to a 0 in the way that Austin Eckler could.
Yeah, and like I had Austin Eckler for like 12% of the target share, which is a pretty significant reduction compared to the seasons past.
I had 14, so you and I were pretty close.
And then I reduced it 10% after the kickoff return news, and I gave Brian Robinson another percent, and then I also kind of distributed a little bit amongst the slot receivers and tight ends. And so, I'm now, Austin Eckler's moving down the projections, Brian Robinson's moving up, and I'm asking myself how much further should Brian Robinson be? Because at RB24 now, I'm honestly starting to feel like I might be low.
Yeah.
It's an RPO system now, too. You got to think about that.
Yeah, he's going to have lanes to run through. There's going to be a lot more efficiency for Brian Robinson. And Jaden Daniels is no slouch. He's been getting a lot of praise right out of camp. He looks crisp. There's been the reality is they've been giving him all the reps. Like the first team reps have been majority been going to Jaden Daniels. So we like to see that right away. He's getting the Anthony Richardson treatment. They're trusting him right off the bat. So a 0 RB candidate, Brian Robinson, he's going to be a solid floor guy. And if he breaks right, could give you a top 15, top 12 season.
Yeah, if the touchdowns follow, that's where it's going to really come down to. The touchdowns have to be there, and he has to be involved in the passing game. If he regresses in the passing game, this is where we talk about the projection missing. Right. Like if he goes from our projection.
But I think that's kind of accounted for in terms of the target share percentage.
But I mean, it's always NFL. There's always a scenario where they just give, 80% of it to Austin Eckler because he can't run the ball, and we miscalculated. And then now next thing you know is that Brian Robinson is actually getting 55% of the rushing share, and he's only getting 4% of the target share, which can matter in PPR leagues. It would help him in half PPR. So there's a lot of variance here that we need to account for, and we'll get more clarity as the season goes on. But original projections, the fact that we're both bullish on them, I'm happy for the projection where Brian Robinson's at.
Well, we're going to take a break, but after the break, we're going to talk about Brandon Aiyuk and the San Francisco 49ers. Before that, a word from our sponsors.
This episode is made possible by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly, especially now. It's Best Ball Mania season, baby! Best Ball Mania 5! I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems, but they have the NBA pick'ems, baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off.
That's right. Go draft on Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code Underworld. Billy, San Francisco 49ers have had a lot of offseason rumblings about their wide receiver core being split up. Is it Brandon Aiyuk on the trade block? No, wait, it's draft day and Deebo Samuel might get dealed to someone else. But we're in June 13th. Both these wide receivers are on the team. Juwan Johnson extended. Jacob Cowing drafted. Ricky Pearsall drafted. I have concerns about Brandon Aiyuk right now. Look, I have him as my 33rd wide receiver. And yes, it all gets clustered close together. But he's a player that I have almost no exposure to. I've gone through almost 100 drafts on Underdog Fantasy, and I think I've clicked his name once or twice in these drafts because his price is so expensive. He's being drafted 18th overall, Billy. I don't see a pathway for Brandon Aiyuk to pay off that ADP. Where do the rankings have Brandon Aiyuk?
Yeah, I'm not as bullish as the draft rooms are. They have him as wide receiver 12. I'm not that far behind, but I am behind. So Aiyuk comes in for me as wide receiver 15. But it's very close to wide receiver 16 and 17. It breaks down to one, you talk about who's moving, who's not moving. I understand it's the NFL and contracts can change at any given time, but right now, currently, Deebo is under contract. Brandon Aiyuk is not. And so in my opinion, Aiyuk right now currently is probably the one who's moving. We've seen Pittsburgh's name who consistently pops up as a potential landing spot and their need of another receiver. So as a Niner fan, I do not think that we're going to have both these guys on the roster at the come week one. It would be nice, and it would be a surprise to me if we did. But the offseason moves are signaling that they are expecting otherwise as well. You don't go out and move somebody into round one and take a receiver if you expect, Brandon Aiyuk to be there. You don't go out and re-sign Juwan Jennings, and draft another receiver in the process. So every move to me has signaled that they are moving on from one of the two. I think it's Brandon Aiyuk. And then they go out and pay the money for Christian McCaffrey, well above market value. And he is, in my opinion, the best running back in football and is not just a running back. He's a receiver, and that's where he's getting that money and why it's that way. But I think that Shanahan is creative enough to get by. The last we heard is that Niners offered $26 million per year to Brandon Aiyuk, and we haven't heard anything since. If I'm Aiyuk, I get that you want $28-30 million a year, but you're on a team that is going to be a Super Bowl contender again. You get to stay with a quarterback that you had success with, and an offense you've had success with. And we joked around about this, Bradley, but I would much rather be disappointed and lose the Super Bowl year after year than not make the playoffs at another team year after year in my career. And so I would take the extra, $2 million less, $3 million less, and get them incentives, get them in Super Bowl bonuses, and go out and play. That's me as a person. And so I get that, these guys are out here for the money and they're going to play, but you have to think about the team. Like, look at Tom Brady and what he did for the years, taking less of a contract in order to better the team and to make the Super Bowl and to get better surrounding casts. I get that you think of your family first and foremost, but at the same time, you have to look at your team as a family as well and what you're able to accomplish together. If you look at that as a collective and say, hey, I'm going to take $2 or $3 million less a year so that way we can get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I hear you. Aiyuk right now for me, 25% target share, 120 targets, 82 receptions, just a hair under 1,000 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns in 15 games. I have him well below ADP, and any of those landing spots that you mentioned, Billy, don't instill fantasy confidence
He'd go down.
either. Right. And he's there because of the contingency upside if any of Debo is out or Kittle is out.
That was my whole talking point is the expected catch rate this year is slightly above 69%. His expected yards per reception is just a tick above 15 yards. If you move over to Russell Wilson, or you move over to, say, Aiden O'Connell or anybody else throwing the ball inside of the Vegas Minshew, right? Whoever else is going to throw the ball for the Raiders, those numbers are not going to be the same. We saw the same thing with like players that, like, you look back and you say players who have shot themselves in the foot chasing the money, who had these extreme efficiencies that left a team that they were comfortable in and go to another team and decline. I mean, I'm looking at the second contract from a player. I'm looking at potential third contract from a player. You can't be short-minded here and think about the immediate contract when you are in a system that is very friendly and not only very friendly to the playmakers, but the quarterback, just the overall system itself. And so I think it's a mistake on his part. I'm not the player, but at the end of the day, like from a number standpoint, efficiency standpoint, it makes sense to stay.
Well, I'll keep it on the negative train here, Billy. We're going to move to Baltimore, and the Baltimore Ravens, they didn't do much this offseason. They let Odell Beckham go, but they extended Rashad Bateman, and recently Bateman, yes, he had been getting hyped by Mark Andrews and a blah, 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 but he's also been having some pretty tough mini camp based on reports we're hearing out of Baltimore. But it's not only Bateman that I'm low on, it's also Zay Flowers. Flowers is a player that's getting steamed up the best ball boards. He's currently at the start of the fourth round. Last ADP that I have is 38th overall, the 37th overall. So at that 3-4 turn, and I have Zay Flowers as not 35th overall, but 35th among wide receivers in terms of what he can offer in the best ball streets. Zay Flowers did not score a touchdown last year when Mark Andrews played at least half the snaps. The reality is that it's Andrews who's the first read. And I think that this is a mistake in the best ball streets, that people are very, very high on Zay Flowers. They're building in too much of the contingency upside. Do you believe that Mark Andrews is glass, Billy?
I don't think Mark Andrews is glass, and I agree with you that Zay Flowers is being overdrafted. You mentioned he's going as 35th overall. You had him as wide receiver 35. I have him as wide receiver 31, so we're closer than the ADP is. It just breaks down to a couple things. You mentioned the Mark Andrews being healthy and back. That's one, right? He only saw 108 targets last year, so we can expect some sort of so everyone says a positive regression. Why don't we just call it for progression, for crying out loud? So we're going to talk about progression here at 108 targets. So 108 targets to me last year. Now this year, I've increased it to 122. So progression in the target category. Still wide
115. Yeah.
And still wide receiver 31. On top of it, you get Derrick Henry in the mix, who's now going to take away from the overall passing volume, and it's going to equate to more rushing share, because you got to look at the total plays.
Yep.
Right? It's not that you're going to come out here and go from, 550, just to make the math easy, 550 passing of plays, and let's call it before 550, rushing plays. Those weren't the numbers by any means. I'm just talking about rough math here.
Right.
And if you increase the rushing share by, say, 10%, and you go up to, a little over 600, rush attempts, and these are, these are just, I'm just talking numbers. These are not actual numbers. The pass attempts don't follow along with it, right? It's the total amount of plays that
the pie doesn't get bigger.
Yeah. We're talking about the total amount of plays. And so something has to give is where I'm going with this.
Right.
And it's going to go inside of the receiving game, because you have competition for targets and you have increased rush share. And so if both those are happening and Zay is not getting increased rush share as well as targets, then he's going to ultimately move down the projections.
Yeah, I have Zay for like 9 or 10 attempts on the season, 115 targets, 940 yards, 82 receptions, and 4 touchdowns on through the air. So he's a player that, I'm just lower on. It's so hard to click him when it's that spot. And I think one of the reasons why, well, there's 2 reasons, Billy. I think that drafters are taking him at that spot. One is because of the wide receiver thirst on Underdog specifically. And 2 is because of where Lamar Jackson is going. It's very easy to go like Lamar Jackson, click Zay Flowers. And so right now we're debating, can you get either Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews in the pre-draft process? I have a couple teams, Billy, that I was able to get Andrews, Flowers, and Lamar Jackson. I don't think that's feasible anymore.
Say that Andrews, Flowers, and Lamar Jackson?
Yeah. You have to pick one of the receivers now.
Yeah, you can't get both. Unless somebody falls and you take somebody else early.
Yeah, you have to reach and then it falls, I think, for that to happen. Mandrews I have as tight end 3. He's my projected tight end 3.
He's 4 right now for me, but he's only 2 points behind tight end 3. And I have between tight end 1 and tight end 4 is it's 7 fantasy points. So it's a tight. There's a real discussion, honestly, for the top 5, in my opinion. The top 5 I have is Laporta, Kelsey, McBride, Andrews, and Ingram. And that's a little spicy with Ingram there. But
I love the Ingram call.
Yeah, I mean, it's a volume play right now with no Ridley in town. And so those 5, in my opinion, any one of them could finish as the tight end 1. It's a matter of things breaking the right way, touchdowns, another player maybe regressing, them getting more targets, or somebody gets injured. There's a lot of different avenues. And so when we look at that, typically, I like to look at, number 1, the offense. So 3 of those guys are in exceptional offenses, right? We have Travis Kelce with Patrick Mahomes. We have Detroit, who lacks other weapons outside of the running back and the wide receiver 1. And then Ingram is
Laporta is, a good enough weapon.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like Laporta, Kelsey, and Ingram and Andrews are in positions to really succeed. The one that could be out of place here is Trey McBride, but I like McBride as a talent, so that's why he still remains here. And the weapons themselves,
weapon 2.
Yeah, and again, they will lack weapons as well. And so any argument can be made for any of these 5 guys as the tight end 1. I wouldn't argue it if somebody had him that way.
Whew. Great. We have a question that was coming up earlier about Justin Herbert. I think it was Jose asked, why is Herbert so low on Underdog? This has to be a screaming value, right? And I'm pulling up Justin Herbert right now. He is my quarterback 18, 108th overall. His ADP is 132, so I am a little bit higher on Justin Herbert than the market in terms of like quarterback value. But, 18th overall, he's going like quarterback 17, 18. I think that's the right spot for him right now.
I'm at quarterback 16, and it just breaks down to the coaching changes and how we expect this offense to change. I mean, he went from one of the most pass-heavy, friendly offenses in the NFL to an offense that is now led with Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. And in their time together spent with SF, they were a heavy run team. I would expect a pretty significant decline in passing volume. That being said, I do think that he's a bit of a value inside of draft rooms just because it's not like they have the best running backs to lean on, right? We have Gus Edwards, we have J.K. Dobbins, we have, the rookie and Vidal. And so there's some, I should say, some opportunity there that could lead to some struggles. But at the same time, they don't have the best weapons in the passing game either. So, yes, you go out and get Ladd McConkey. Palmer has been productive in his time as well. We are hoping that Quentin Johnson can take a step forward, and the tight end is kind of a shit show. And so I think that ultimately the passing volume is going to decline significantly. The offense is going to be less productive without Keenan Allen and Mike Williams there. So we're going to see some efficiencies drop as well for Justin Herbert. And so ultimately that's where his projection kind of, I wouldn't say fizzles, but let's just call it fizzles. It's going to fizzle down to, the quarterback 2 range outside of quarterback 1 where he has been drafted in the past.
All right, we'll stay in Los Angeles with the Chargers, but their backfield right now it's tough to decipher. You mentioned it's Gus Edwards, it's J.K. Dobbins, Kimani Vidal. I don't know which one I want to click right now. The slight edge for me is Gus Edwards in terms of my projections. I have Edwards at a 44% rush share, Dobbins at 38. I'm much lower on Vidal. I think that he is, the other two are NFL ready. And so my Gus Edwards is he's a reliable back. He's been trusted by the Harbaughs in the past. And J.K. Dobbins, we loved what he was projected to do last year before his major injury. But now we're looking at a player who has had multiple knee injuries, multiple significant injuries that have cost him a lot of opportunity when he's been a younger back. And now he could be a zero, or he could be a massive, massive value, because if you give even J.K. Dobbins 30-something% of the rush share in this LA Chargers offense, you're looking at a player who can crack the top 36 and easily outperform by multi-tiers, be a difference maker for you. But how are you discerning the Chargers backfield right now?
I think Gus Edwards leads it pretty clearly. I think he's been pretty efficient, actually, if you look at his yards per carry. Dobbins the wild card, though, because if he's healthy, he's by far the most talented back in this backfield. But we've seen what happens if you rely on Dobbins' health. And so I'm not going to, plant my flag on Dobbins, but I'm much higher on him in the projections than the consensus is, and even inside the draft room. So I think that both these backs have a chance to be productive. We have to keep in mind that they just came from a run-friendly offense with an RPO system to a quarterback that is now going to be throwing from the pocket with less offensive weapons. So I think there's going to be a decline for both these guys. So I'm not necessarily sold that any of these guys are going to do great, but Gus Edwards right now is going as RB35. I have him as RB39 the projections, so I'm slightly behind ADP in the projections.
Yeah, but Dobbins is going 179 overall. I have Edwards at RB32 and Dobbins at RB34.
That's pretty high on Dobbins. The thing about, I have Dobbins at 50. Where'd you say he was going in ADP? It's late. It's late in drafts.
179 overall. And
that's RB what? So Dobbins is going as RB56. So I'm slightly ahead of ADP. The Dobbins is just, he could be a zero. He could get hurt.
But if he hits, that is an offense where he'll hit.
Yeah,
and Gus Edwards is on the wrong side of the age cliff.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't want to say I'm avoiding the running backs inside of the Chargers offense, but I'm not necessarily hammering it when I see him on the clock. And I'm leaning into like Josh Palmer and Ladd McConkey, and I'm taking chances on Quentin Johnson at times when he falls in drafts, just to take the next step forward. But there's really, if I'm pairing this at all, I'm going like Herbert and Palmer, and that's really it, quite frankly.
Well, we got a massive extension update today. If y'all haven't checked out Player Profiler today, I was 5 minutes delayed getting it out today because of Trevor Lawrence's massive extension. 5 years, $275 million, makes him tied for the highest paid quarterback, tying Joe Burrow. Trevor Lawrence right now in my rankings, best ball rankings, quarterback 17, 103rd overall. He's going as 119 overall, so maybe a round above, but not out of the ordinary. Billy, where do you have Trevor Lawrence, the new leading earner among quarterbacks in the NFL?
Every year we talk about how these contracts are bad, and then
so bad.
2 to 3 years from now, it looks like it's a good deal because inflation, and it's just so I'm just gonna say
bad teams stay bad, Billy.
Yeah, I don't love the contract, but I'm a little higher on Trevor Lawrence than consensus. I'm at his quarterback 13 right now. I do think that he's continued to take steps forward. It's not like he's regressed significantly inside of his time in the NFL. So I think that he takes another step forward, gets a little more accurate, gets a little more efficient. And still has Evan Ingram, still has Kirk, still has an exceptional pass catching back with Travis Etienne, and so I'm higher on him than most, but I'm not as high as the Jacksonville Jaguars are on him, and so I wouldn't have paid that money.
Jacksonville needs to stay off the wee.
That's seriously,
because they are so high on Trevor Lawrence. I do need to. I need to bump up Trevor Lawrence's touchdowns. I had him only at 20. I think I need to get him up closer to 24 or so. But
yeah, I think that's pretty safe. I mean, if I look at mine, I'm going to pull up. Let me pull them up. So Trevor Lawrence, Jacksonville. Let me go to that division. Give me a second. I got to click around. Got the division. Let's go over to court. I'm at 23.6.
Okay. Yeah. So my 24 change was the right one, I think.
Yeah.
Good. What is your take on rookie Bo Nix? Because right now my projections are way too high on him, but he is an accuracy close to the line of scrimmage guy. Just going to dump it off. I have concerns that he's good at NFL football, but if Sean Payton believes in him and gives him the opportunity, we could be looking at a lot of small little dump off efficiency moving plays. Right now, Bo Nix is going 210 overall, like last round, like taking a shot. I mean, are there worse quarterbacks to be taking shots on than Bo Nix?
I like Bo Nix more than the average person, but I'm a little biased being in Oregon here. And so Bo Nix was pretty damn good, dude. So there's a difference. There's Auburn Bo Nix and then there's Oregon Bo Nix. And they're completely like tale of two tales.
And what is the Denver Broncos Bo Nix?
I think the Denver Broncos Bo Nix is going to be a blend between the two of them, but more Oregon. I mean, so when we were talking about Bo Nix in college, Oregon, he averaged 74.9 completion percentage. And Auburn, it was 59.4. So it is quite a bit difference. That being said, he got older, he got more mature. He was able to get more weapons, different system. Right. You know, and then you have the yards per attempt, and every single year it increased from 2019, 6.7, 2020, it went to 6.8, 2021, it went to 7.1, 2022, it went to 8.8, 2023, 9.6. So he's on the right track in the trajectory here. Plus, it's now Sean Payton's guy, right? They went out and they drafted him. And so Sean Payton has done a fairly damn good job of quarterback talent, addressing it and also applying it to the NFL. And so I'm higher on Bo Nix than the average person. I haven't gone up and crazily moved him. So I think realistic range of outcomes is quarterback 24 through 27. I currently have him as quarterback 27, but we're talking about a half a fantasy point to 26. And then we're talking about 4 or 5 fantasy points to quarterback 25. And so there's a real chance that in the next, couple weeks, as we get more clarity of the situation with Bo Nix, that he moves up to that back end quarterback 2 range for me. He has some weapons to succeed. I mean, Cortland Sutton's there. They got Mims there. They went out and drafted some more receivers. He's got a couple of running backs who can also catch the ball. And so I think that Bo Nix is being underdrafted inside draft rooms right now. And why not take the shot? There's a lot of quarterbacks right now in Underdog that you can just push the position and take 3 late and not have to really be that concerned about the position.
The other component to Bo Nix is if you miss out on Joe Burrow, you get the Denver-Cincinnati Week 17 matchup, which could turn out very interesting in terms of a shootout. So throw Bo Nix if you got some Cincinnati players, and take some late Denver. If you miss out, you could easily tap Bo Nix and Josh Reynolds in the last 2 rounds of your draft. You get some easy Denver taps. Let's keep scrolling through. Let's take a look at the LA Rams backfield. We've got Blake Corum, Kyren Williams. That was a real talking point at the NFL draft room in Pinckney, Michigan. When Blake Corum was selected, Matt Kelly pulled me aside and he's like, Bradley, how far does Kyren Williams fall this offseason? And Billy, I'm going to pose the question to you. How far, when it's all said and done, what's the closing line value? What do you think Kyren Williams' closing line value will be for the drafts when we come August time, assuming that Blake Corum is healthy and Kyren Williams is healthy?
So I think it depends on the news and how, what we're hearing through camp the next couple of weeks. But we're seeing Kyren now slip to kind of the end of round 3. At that point, I'm a buyer. When he was going in round 2, I was a little bit more hesitant to pull the trigger. But we have that, price value perception and what we're willing to kind of take the gamble on. I like Corum. Let me just start with that.
Yes.
And I don't want to come out and make it sound like I am this anti-Corum player, because I'm not. I'm probably higher on Corum than the average analyst is. But I also understand Sean McVay and what he's done in the past with running backs. And he has been, for the lack of a better word, pretty limited in who he chooses to run the ball in the backfield. And we saw this with Cam Akers. We saw it with Kyren Williams. When he finds the running back that he trusts, he leans on that running back, and he doesn't necessarily spread the ball around in the backfield. So I think we've seen for a fact that he trusts Kyren Williams. And I think that as good of a talent as Blake Corum is, I think it's going to take time for Sean McVay to trust him and to be inserted in the offense. So I think that as long as Kyren Williams is healthy, it's pretty safe to say he's probably going to see the bulk of the carries here. I mean, I have projected for 233 rushing attempts, and that might be light in comparison to what we could see for him. And I do think that McVay, like I said, trusts him. And so this morning we had a podcast with the Coach Speak Index. If you've seen that account on Twitter,
one of my favorite follows.
Yeah, it's great. Greg is his name. Greg actually takes all of the coaches speak from practice, because there's a difference between preseason and actual game time. Takes all of the coaches speak, and it puts all of that into a database. We're talking about playing time and injuries, evaluates it all, puts it into a database, and he figures out how honest coaches are. If you haven't followed him, I go recommend it.
Huge.
Again, that account is at Coach Speak Index on Twitter. It's awesome. And McVay has, to the point, Greg agreed with that sentiment this morning, was that McVay typically trusts and leans on a running back and states so. So I think that as high as I am on Corum, Kyren Williams is pretty safe to be the lead back, and I think he's valued in round 3.
Yeah, Kyren Williams I have for 232 rush attempts, 951 yards, 9 rush touchdowns, 9% target share, so just a hair under 50 targets, 250 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. That puts him as my RB12 and 22nd overall.
We're close. I'm RB10. And then from the same projections, 52% of the rushing share. I got him to 4.7 yards per carry average. So it's 1,079 yards and some fractional yards there. Sure. 8.6 rushing touchdowns. I got him for 11% of target share as well, which is going to be 42.7 receptions on my side, 299.2 receiving yards, and 1.8 touchdowns. So we're in the same ballpark.
Billy, we got news today that Alvin Kamara he didn't practice in minicamp.
Oh God, get this shit here.
He didn't practice in minicamp.
Fucking
and
June,
then,
people.
And then it was also reported that Juwan Johnson has a foot injury, and
that matters. The other ones don't. I don't care who reports right now. People are going to show up. It's June. We have multiple months till the game time. It doesn't. For crying out loud,
it's all peacocking.
We're going to get flagged on YouTube. I don't give a fuck. It breaks down. They're going to show up. They're going to play. He's a veteran, for fuck's sakes. It's the Juwan Johnson thing matters, because now it actually affects Taysom Hill and where he's.
Yes, this was the segue I was planning for.
So now he's probably going to see more target share, which in my opinion is going to see less rushing share, which is going to vulture less touchdowns from Kamara, who's going to see more efficiency in the red zone. So if anything, the Juwan Johnson injury helps Alvin Kamara in a weird distribution way. Yeah, but it does. It does.
No, I don't disagree with you. This was my segue into talking about Taysom Hill, Billy, because both you and I are significantly higher than consensus on.
And I'm not a Taysom Hill guy. People know that. I have been cursing Taysom Hill's name since he fucked me out of Best Ball Mania 2 or 3 or whatever it was.
So right now, Taysom Hill is being drafted in the last round of your best ball drafts. He is a tight end listed on DraftKings and Drafters Fantasy. He is listed as a quarterback on FFPC and Underdog. I'm of the belief that Underdog will not change him no matter what.
No, they will not.
FFPC will change him once the depth chart comes out. And so the move here is to draft Taysom Hill as though he is a tight end. He's my tight end 14 in projections. Billy, I know you're not too far off either.
Yeah, he actually moved tight end 13 after the Juwan Johnson news yesterday. So slightly ahead of you. It was tight end 16. So he did move up a couple spots. So this is actually like galaxy brain here, right? If you are playing Superflex on FFPC, this is a real viable strategy to draft Taysom Hill because you get the best of both worlds right now. Because if he does not get moved from the quarterback position, or if he moves from the tight to the tight end position, you have an extra quarterback that's going to be viable, that's going to have multiple ways to score, right? He's going to be rushing the ball.
I mean, he outscored Tua last year multiple weeks because I had Anthony Richardson, Tua, and Taysom Hill on my Pros versus Joe's team. And Anthony Richardson obviously out for the year for most of the year. So there were some weeks where Taysom Hill outscored Tua.
Yeah, and so like again, this is galaxy brain play. You know, looking at Superflex leagues where you know that he could potentially shift in positions, and you could draft him in a tight end premium Superflex league and get the benefit of both worlds. So you're going to have an out either way.
You love to see it. You love to see it. We'll keep fast forwarding to Cincinnati, where we have a clear wide receiver 1, Jamar Chase. Wide receiver 2, T. Higgins, is doing doing his thing. He's holding out for the contract, blah, blah, blah. But the Cincinnati Bengals drafted a 3rd round pick, Jermaine Burton, and Derek Brown and I are both very high on Jermaine Burton. His reception perception was very high. He played very well, even though it was a low pass volume, the low counting stats in college. But Jermaine Burton is a player that I think we want to take shots on, especially contingency shots, given the injuries that we've seen from T. Higgins, Jamar Chase over the last few years, and even just T. Higgins disappearing altogether. This could be really interesting in year 1 for a player like Burton. What do you think about Burton, Billy?
Yeah, I'm higher than consensus on Burton as well. Wide receiver 58. Underdog, he's being drafted as wide receiver 70. I did a ranking summit with Jody Smith over at Full Time Fantasy, who's also a friend of ours, who's been he's I think top 7 in consistency rankings at Fantasy Pros for year over year. So he's been very, very consistent in his accuracy, and he's also very high in Burton, more so than I am. I think he had him inside the top 45, and so. It's a little rich for my blood, but there's a path to success there. If you look at, Tyler Boyd and what he was able to do inside of that position as wide receiver 3. So I think that there's a path to success here. I always look at some of the rookie learning curve and the other options in the backfield or as well as the receiving core, what they're going to do. I'm bullish. I'm not that bullish. I think he's going to exceed expectations, and I'm high on him.
You love to see it. You're here. We're here for Jermaine Burton. We got to talk about the Buffalo wide receiver group because it's hard to decipher. There's been positives and negatives for Khalil Shakir this offseason. I've heard some positive buzz, but also he's had some inconsistent days in the camps. He had some boom bust games last year as the wide receiver 3 behind Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. But now it's Keon Coleman. It's Dalton Kincaid, it's Khalil Shakir, it's Curtis Samuel. If you're picking, the guy to stick out for this Buffalo offense, yeah, there's a lot of love for Dalton Kincaid as the Travis Kelce 2.0, but who's going to be the lead target earner among these receiving options, Billy?
I have Kincaid as the number 1 target, number 1 in targets, 104. Very close. Keon Coleman at 101. Coleman right now is going as wide receiver 41, but I like Curtis Samuel's ADP slightly better at wide receiver 50. who I have for 92 targets. So we're splitting hairs in the target distribution. When we look at the coaches, Buffalo recently went out and got Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. Curtis Samuel's career year, where he finished inside the top 30 at the wide receiver position, was with Joe Brady. And so I think that the two reunited. I think he's got plans to use Curtis Samuel in creative ways and get him the ball. I would not be surprised. Curtis Samuel, again, we look at health, right? Health has been a concern at some points in his career, but if he can stay healthy and on the field, I mean, I would not be surprised if he actually out-targeted Keon Coleman. And then he's used in multiple facets. He's using the running as a running back. He's using the receiver. He's using the slot. He's used kind of all of the field. And so I like kind of the outs I have better with him versus Keon Coleman. And so I'm going to pull the trigger on the later ADP with the most potential outs.
Yeah, Samuel is the one among those who I project for the most touches. So I have 111 projected touches for Curtis Samuel, 30 rush attempts, 81 targets, an 8% rush share for Samuel. I do have Keon Coleman slightly edging Kincaid in terms of targets, 98 to 95, but it's flat, Billy. And that's given the price points of like Keon Coleman, who's going 71st overall, it's really hard for me to say, Keon Coleman, he's a player that I like. Curtis Samuel, he's a player that I like because, it's just so flat. And yes, they could have some spike weeks, but maybe it's just Josh Allen that I want to be on and not take a roll of the dice on any of the pass catchers.
So for those of you who are listening, Bradley messaged me today and was like, "Hey, do you want me to send you a show sheet?" I said, "No, fuck it. Let's just wing this. Let's just look at the projections. Let's just talk about players who we like, who we don't like. Talk about some players who are mispriced or overpriced, undervalued, or whatever it may be." So when he says, would you say that you had him for total touches for Curtis Samuel?
110.
I'm for 111.2. So this is how in lockstep we are in terms of projections.
It was 30.2 rush attempts, 81 targets.
And so I have slightly less rush attempts, 19, but I have slightly more targets. So ultimately we're getting, we're skinning a cat two ways. We're getting to the same, to the same result. But this is the beauty about projections. They're subjective. You can get to different ways. You can get to the end result different ways, or you can get, completely different results based upon how you interpret this offense to look. Yes. It looks like we have a same interpretation of the offense, just different ways to get there. And Curtis Samuel is undervalued. If you look at his past success, when I talk about his time with Joe Brady, that was in 2020. He finished as wide receiver 27 in points per game that year. Every single year of his career outside of his rookie year, he has beaten wide receiver 50. So let's talk 2023 and work our way back. 2023, wide receiver 48. 2022, wide receiver 44. He got injured 2021. He doesn't qualify. 2020, wide receiver 27. That was with Brady, Joe Brady, offensive coordinator. We got 2019, wide receiver 48. 2018, wide receiver 43. He's going currently, like I said, as wide receiver 50. He's beaten that in every single point of his career. It's a smash play for me.
You love to see it. You love to hear it. Let's go. All right, Billy, give us, we're closing out here. You've been a great guest on Stackhunters. Make sure you guys are smashing the subscribe button on Player Profiler. We're over 25,000 subs on the YouTube channel. And I host this every Thursday. Usually it's with Dan Williamson. Sometimes we bring on a guest, but Billy has been gracious going through the projections.
Kick Dan out of here. Get your ass out of here, Dan.
Dan's great. But what I want, Billy, is for you to give us, I don't know, give us a hot take. Give us something to leave the listeners wanting more.
Yeah, I'm going to say avoid Xavier Worthy at all costs right now. And I get it. He's the hot commodity. He's the new shiny toy. But we look at where he's going inside of ADP right now. He's going as wide receiver 35. Bradley is going inside. He's going as wide. It's overall 61st pick on Underdog. And I take a look at the projections. And given this is one of the most difficult wide receiving cores to project, given the Rashee Rice news, we have Worthy the addition. There's so many moving pieces in this offense, but like even with me kind of boosting the numbers up and thinking that he's going to be kind of the lead target and moving him towards the top, he still doesn't crack the top 50 in my wide receiver rankings. There is a path to where he could outperform that, but to be inside the top 35 at the position, it's a stretch. And so I understand he's in one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in football. You got Patrick fucking Mahomes, right? But there is a realistic outcome to where this wide receiving core is messed up and it's just the ball spread around, and they're going to get Travis Kelce more involved. Pacheco got more involved into the passing game last year. There's a real chance that he underperforms in his rookie year, and people are completely overdrafting him. And so I'm going to say, if you're listening on the podcast right now, take him when he falls in draft rooms. Do not buy him at cost.
Billy, where did you have Xavier Worthy among wide receivers?
Wide receiver number 50. Let me see. I just spelled his name wrong. 1 second. Worthy 53.
I have him at wide receiver 50.
So we're very close.
Very, very close. He's going 62nd overall on Underdog right now.
So
I have him
high.
at 114th overall in my projections in terms of best ball value rating. So that accounts for positional value and weights positional value. And so, Billy, it's been great. We are not worthy of Worthy at this point.
Dun-dun-dun.
All right. On behalf of Billy Muzio, I'm Bradley Stalder. Make sure you guys smash the subscribe button here on Player Profiler. Until next time, everyone, good luck in the best ball streets.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.